Bonjour, moi c'est Marie. Je suis journaliste et conceptrice. Ce que j'aime faire dans la vie, c'est imaginer des projets sur le travail ou la créativité. Mon projet quand je serai grande, c'est d'être un mix entre deux personnes qui m'inspirent, Johnny Mitchell et Stefan Sagmeister. Si vous ne voyez pas de qui je parle, Stefan Sagmeister est un designer connu pour avoir travaillé sur des pochettes d'albums pour Lou Reed ou les Rolling Stones. Il a aussi collaboré avec le Guggenheim ou HBO. Et en parallèle, il a dépassé son travail de designer graphique pour développer un univers très personnel. Stefan est autrichien, mais il vit aux États-Unis depuis des années. Et il se trouve qu'il y a 1 an, j'ai décidé de partir seule à New York quelques jours pour travailler sur une idée. Un projet qui aurait du sens pour moi, un truc que je pourrais apporter au monde. À ce moment-là, je sens que c'est le moment de contacter Stefan. Alors un mardi matin, je lui envoie un mail et 2 heures plus tard, il me répond « Ok, rendez-vous le 9 avril ». Quand j'arrive à New York, le contrôleur à la douane me demande si je viens pour l'éclipse. Alors non, je n'étais pas au courant, mais il paraît qu'une éclipse, c'est le signe d'une nouvelle vie qui commence. Coïncidence ? Je ne pense pas. En tout cas, à défaut d'une nouvelle vie, cette rencontre avec Stefan m'a permis de confirmer mon intuition et d'arriver jusqu'à vous aujourd'hui pour vous présenter Zéro, un nouveau projet. Je vais suivre le conseil que Stefan m'a glissé à la fin de notre rencontre.
I ultimately think that this direction of trying to do work that is helpful and delightful is true for any profession. And I think that if we can achieve that, it's also meaningful to us because we as people, as humans, really enjoy helping somebody and we enjoy being able to delight somebody.
Alors voilà, je suis ravie de lancer Zéro, un podcast sur le processus créatif. À partir de maintenant et tous les 15 jours, vous pourrez retrouver une personnalité créative et inspirante, partager son quotidien, ses conseils, sa méthode et sa vision pour mieux construire la vôtre. Mes invités seront artistes, cinéastes, musiciens ou designers et auront un point commun, leur manière de penser et de créer est unique. Prenez cette conversation comme une introduction, un épisode pilote, une V1 en quelque sorte. Cet épisode est exceptionnellement en anglais, mais l'accent autrichien de Stefan facilitera la tâche aux moins bilingues d'entre vous, je l'espère. Nous avons parlé de la manière dont sont nés ses derniers projets, de son quotidien et de sa vision de la création. J'espère vraiment que ça vous plaira. Okay, do you mind if I just put my phone just to have the time?
Sure.
J'ai commencé par lui demander pourquoi il avait choisi le design et quel était son motto aujourd'hui encore.
I chose design very, very early. I was lucky enough to know early in my life what I wanted to do. And that came about because I had started to write for a small magazine when I was 15. And the person who had done the layout for that magazine had moved to Vienna. I was in Western Austria. And so I tried my hand on doing the layout because nobody else wanted to do it. And I discovered that I actually liked it better than the writing. And because that magazine was also quite involved in organizing concerts or some political demonstrations, or so it was a left-wing magazine. Yeah. These things also needed graphics, you know, a poster, yeah, a transparent, whatever. And so I also started to do those. And I enjoyed doing it, and then it became clear to me that I wanted to study design once I was out of high school.
And now, when you work every day, what is your ambition?
Well, I would say I probably would talk about it differently because I know so much more about, well, I have more experience not just as a designer, but as a human being, of course. But it's not so different, I think, than from the beginning, because I think what bound me to design then, and I probably wouldn't have expressed it that way, but even when I was 15 and did a poster for a concert, I was sort of amazed that you could create something, put it up, and it would have a visible effect, meaning 400 people would show up for that concert because of that poster. And this possibility of agency, I thought, was very important to me. And I think those two strategies or those two facts still inform my design today very, very much so. I would say that the easiest way to describe something like good design would be a piece of design that helps somebody, meaning the functionality, and that delights somebody, meaning the joyful, beautiful, aesthetic aspect of it.
Après avoir collaboré avec des marques et institutions pendant des années, Stefan se consacre aujourd'hui presque à plein temps à des projets de longue haleine, et notamment au dernier en date, Now is Better. À travers cette œuvre, il présente des preuves tangibles que dans une perspective à long terme, la plupart des aspects du développement humain se sont améliorés. C'est un projet qui prend la forme d'un livre, d'exposition et d'installation. You talk about the long-term vision and the long-term process versus the short-term project. Why is it so important for you?
Well, I understand myself as a communication designer. And I figured out or discovered that almost all media, by definition, by their very existence, concentrates on short-term messaging. And the cycle of this term has become shorter and shorter. You know, we used to have yearly almanacs, and now we have always on Twitter or X or even cable TV news. And there is a very clear way I can show that the shorter the cycle, the more negative the message.
Yes?
Yes. And the reason that is because things that are negative happen very quickly, like catastrophes, scandals, things like that.
Yes.
While things that tend to be positive tend to become so very, very slowly, and they don't really lend itself for the short-term news cycle. I give you an example like that's impressive to me is the headline, 135,000 people escaped extreme poverty, could have appeared truthfully every single day for the past 25 years. And it didn't appear a single day, not one day, because it moves very, very slowly. And it just isn't interesting for a short-term cycle. There's many other reasons we as people, including myself, prefer negative messages over positive messages. We think people who tell us negative messages are more intelligent than people who tell us positive messages. This is not my opinion. There is proper good studies that I also talk about in our book that basically prove these. This is not something that's just a discovery. Our love and our intuition of negative messages has very serious consequences. One being that I just saw that 60% of all people between 16 and 25 years old think the world is going down terribly. And this kind of doom and gloom is not empowering. It puts you into a prison. Most people who live in doom and gloom don't do anything. Now, I, of course, am not saying everything is fantastic. Not at all. I think there's many, many things that need to be improved. But we won't improve them if we live in this doom and gloom. On top of it, it has serious political consequences. This idea that everything used to be great and now isn't, really, well, it's provably wrong, because things used to be much worse on almost every aspect you look at it. We had much less to eat. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, as a world population as we do now. Extreme poverty has been reduced from 90% down to 9%. A much higher percentage of us died in wars than they do now, including what's going on in Gaza and the Ukraine. Now, that probably won't really be important for the people who are killed right now in Gaza and the Ukraine, but for the rest of us, it really is important to know that we went from roughly 300 people being killed per 100,000 down to 1. So there's huge differences.
Yes, it's another perspective.
Yes, and that other perspective, I think, is helpful to know if we want to actually tackle the problems that need tackling. And I ultimately do believe that this is a communication problem. And so as a communication designer, I have a big interest in tackling it.
How did you get this idea?
It started when I was at the designer in residence at the American Academy in Rome. And it really got started by me having dinner with 70 people. And there was a very smart lawyer sitting next to me at one time who said that what we are seeing right now in Hungary, Turkey, and Brazil really means the end of modern democracy. And when later that night I looked that up, when did modern democracy start, how did it develop, it turned out that he was completely, totally wrong. And I found it super interesting that you can be highly educated, reading the news every day, and have no idea, ultimately, in what kind of world that you live in.
And once you get this idea, after this conversation, how did you work?
I do research.
Okay.
Meaning, I draw also, meaning I've already started to think of how could this possibly be communicated? In what media?
Yeah.
You know, like what went out immediately was everything digital, because I can already not open files that are 15 years old.
Yeah.
So if I wanna communicate about the long term, of course I wanted to communicate on something that is also long term itself, that is a long term medium. So ultimately, 200-year-old paintings seemed like a good idea because they're already proven that they can stay around for 200 years. So chances that they might be around in 200 years from now are pretty good. I, of course, read many books, contacted the author of the very best books. In this case, it was Steven Pinker at Harvard and Max Roser at Oxford, simply because I felt that they were dealing with the best data and looked at it from a very intelligent and smart point of view. So those two scientists were very big influences. And then just basically figured out what kind of sections are out there, what is interesting to me, but also mixed it with personal stories, because I found that many people find data kind of cold, while personal stories, even if they're anecdotal, and in my case, we actually had a very good stories about my grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents. Mix those into the mix. Yeah. Well, really started working on it 5 years ago, and have been working on it ever since.
Yeah.
And probably will, considering that I don't see an end of negative news anywhere in the near future, I'm right now, and because I actually find the process very enjoyable, I have no plan of stopping.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And do you think you could have worked like this when you were younger? Because it should be difficult to have this long-term vision, to build an idea.
I don't think I could have done it as younger, because I didn't even know that you could do that. Like when I was younger, I looked at design as graphic design, which by its definition, really is in the service of something else. If you do an album cover, it's in the service of the music that you're visualizing. If I did even this 15, the cover for this magazine, it was in the service of this magazine. Or if it was, whatever, a little poster for a music festival, it was in the service of this music festival. So I don't think that I reflected or that I thought, I should do a poster that's just my opinion on something. And I think this came much, much, much later, where I had a very good, fantastic mentor by the name of Tibor Kalman. And he really always talked about graphic design as a language, as in different from literature and different from pure visuals, by combining this world of words and imagery as being its own separate language. And once I really realized that to be true, it also became clear to me that now that I've learned this language, I went to school for it twice, I've really studied it, I've worked in it all my life, I should try to talk about something that is non-commercial. Because most graphic design companies really use that language to promote or sell something. Once I realized that, all sorts of projects came out of it, including the Happy Show that you saw in Paris, or an exhibition and book we did later on about beauty, or there was this film about happiness called The Happy Film. And now this whole, meaning the book is called Now is Better, but this whole long-term thinking projects, which really are all subjects I'm interested in, and that I think with the language of design, you can talk about them in a unique way that literature or pure imagery can't. And meaning, if you remember the show about happiness, it really had this combination of imagery, of things that you could participate, of handwritten words, that was a very different sort of experience and a very different kind of mix than, let's say, reading a self-help book on beauty. It was approached quite differently. And in that case, I can say successfully, and I can say successfully because I literally got hundreds of letters and emails from people who visited that show and took it upon themselves to figure out my email address and write to me. So I can say that our goal as to help somebody and to delight somebody was achieved. Not for everybody who was in the show, obviously, but for many.
Je comprends qu'aimer le processus est une notion clé pour Stefan et qu'il a aujourd'hui le luxe d'avoir trouvé sa mécanique créative. Mais je me demande quelle relation il a avec l'œuvre. Est-ce que c'est le chemin qui compte ou la destination?
To me, both of them are important. Meaning, obviously, if the process would be terrible, annoying, it would be a problem. But I also very much want a effective and sometimes hopefully delightful end result. For the largest period of my life was doing graphic design work, and where you often work with very ephemeral media, websites that change all the time. But even if it's a brochure that might be thrown out tomorrow, or a magazine or so. So I think it's also pleasing to me to have to work in media that really are much more stable. And I just came back from Barcelona, which at off is a quite digital design conference with thousands of people participating. I talked to people in their 20s, and they have a very, very similar kind of desires than I have, as in creating something that is finalized at one time. And I think it is frustrating, no matter what generation that you're from, it is frustrating to work on something that is never done.
It's always about the way of people will see, will listen, will watch your project. Do you care about the new ways of consuming content?
Well, I have to say I care very much about the audience, which I think is the reason that I'm still very much a designer as opposed to being an artist. Like, I've talked to many artists who couldn't care at all what the audience takes away or not. But they're ultimately doing the piece for themselves, and the audience might be able to take whatever rest if they find themselves in it or not, but it's not really part of the problems of the person who made it. While I myself definitely also want to please myself, and I found that I'm a mainstream person enough that if I actually think something is good that I made, there is always an audience who feels similar. Okay. Like, I'm just not that strange that I would be singular in that opinion. At the same time, I can clearly say that, when we had the first exhibition of these historic paintings with contemporary inserts, if the audience would have come and clearly would have not been interested in it, and if we would have sold no piece, I would have told myself, okay, I tried it, it didn't work, I better come up with a new strategy. Because I know I want these pieces to work, as in, I want these pieces to have an effect, as in, remind people that what they just saw on X or Twitter does not mean the end of the world. Yeah. So I want these things to work. There is a functionality to it.
À ce moment-là de la conversation, j'ai commencé à vouloir lui parler d'une expo où Sophie Calle partageait une trentaine de ses projets avortés en expliquant les raisons. Il n'a pas vu l'expo, mais je me demande si lui aussi produit beaucoup. Est-ce que deviennent ses œuvres inachevées, ce qui se passe quand ça ne fonctionne pas?
I mean, within this series, all the time, of course. I mean, I have, there are versions of these pieces that never saw the light of day because they're not good.
When you're saying it wasn't good, for you, how do you know if this idea will be good or not, and when do you decide to stop or to switch on another project? I don't know if you work on different projects in the same time.
Yes, I always work on many projects at the same time. I mean, right now I probably have, of these historic paintings, I probably have 20 in the works at the same time, at various levels. Like, on some of them, I might have already worked on a couple of months, and I just try to push them. And some of them are in a state where I know this is really not the way, and I probably have to throw that out and start anew. And some of them are in a way where I think this could yield something, but it needs some pushing, it needs betterment. That could be a better composition, a better color scheme, a better different sizes. Maybe some of them might already have the data involved, some of them not. Some of them might only have the data. So, but ultimately, that all goes in the same direction. But of course, when it comes to, let's say, even within that world, we were doing a large mural for a client in Arkansas, Bentonville in Arkansas. And I had numerous ideas. And ultimately we did one, but there were a good number of ideas that I just like it less than. Like that, or that, meaning it's now much rarer to me. It used to be also that we, would basically present an idea to a client that we quite liked, and the client didn't agree. Yeah. And that idea was just plain killed, and it was, gone. While, of course, now that I'm only doing self-generated work, that doesn't really happen. It might happen that I have an idea now, and I either don't know how to do it, or it's an idea and it's just too big and I don't know how to get the budget to make it happen. But it doesn't really happen in the same way that I would have an idea that I'm excited about, and I push it to the point where I know how to do it, and then it gets killed. It just doesn't happen anymore, which of course is very pleasing.
Je veux maintenant lui parler de ses congés sabbatiques, car Stefan a toujours pris une année off, sans travailler, tous les 7 ans, avec quelques variations. C'est un moment pendant lequel le studio est fermé, et le but est pour lui de renouer avec sa créativité.
My next sabbatical is starting this fall. On October 1st, the next sabbatical will start again.
So, which is I want to ask you, what's the plan?
I used to start the first sabbatical with the plan not to have a plan, and that did not work for me.
Okay, why?
Because I just was involved in busy work, sending this to these people who wanted it. I was reacting. When I didn't have a plan, I was reacting to demands given to me by the world. And I needed a plan to not be not reactionary, to not react to the world, but basically figure out what I wanted to do and do that.
When you are talking by the world, what do you mean exactly?
Meaning because I'm a big planner, I purposefully did not have a plan, and it didn't work. As in, I was, sending files to Japanese design magazines who wanted them. I was, returning this and taking care of that and answering questions here and there, but I wasn't really creating anything, because ultimately reaction is so much easier than creation. And when I, after a couple of weeks, was extremely unhappy about how this is all going, I thought, this is not working, I'll need a plan.
Okay, so what is your...
Well, in this sabbatical is sort of strange, because ultimately I'm already on sabbatical, meaning I already do whatever I want. So I'm almost taking a sabbatical from the sabbatical. I still want to do it, for one, because past sabbaticals have been very successful, but also because I feel that even though I very much likely will continue on the trajectory that I'm on, which is new, it's the first sabbatical, and the only rule on the sabbaticals is that I'm not going to repeat the same thing I did in the last sabbatical. So not the same places. This time I also go together with my partner, which is the first time to do that. And we're going to do Spanish-speaking cities. So starting in Madrid, then Guadalajara in Mexico, and then Buenos Aires in Argentina. So 3 places, 4 months each for a year. And I'm sure that just basically being in these different cultures will have an influence. But also I found that if you're somewhere else, my automatic self-censorship, as in I don't know how to do it, I don't know how to make it, is sort of on ease, because I'm far away from New York. Why don't I make a sketch of it anyway, even though I don't know how this could possibly be made?
And you said that creation could be very difficult, or do you think it is?
Well, creation, I'm not saying that creation is difficult, I just think it's more difficult than reaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not difficult for you.
Well, I would say that, yeah, it's more difficult for me than reaction. And I still, even today in the morning, start with creation because it's more difficult. You know, like I still haven't done emails. You know, it's almost 1 o'clock and I probably get to emails at 2 or 3 because even if it's difficult emails, it's much easier to react to emails than it is to come up with something new or to design something new. So I always do the more difficult things in the morning. So all morning today, like in most mornings, I try to do something in the creation world and then move on to the easier stuff. Because I know that if I start with the easy stuff, I never get to the difficult stuff.
How your state of mind has an influence on your work?
Well, an interesting one. I would say that if I'm doing well, I'm much more productive and helpful to my surroundings, which also reflects into the content of all of this work that I'm doing, because I'm very much, from my own experience, I know that if I'm doing well, I am helpful to my girlfriend, my family, my friends, even my acquaintances. If I'm not doing well, if I'm anxious or possibly even depressed, I'm doing nothing. I'm not helpful at all. And so if I read studies that show that 60% of all 16 to 25-year-olds are in this bubble of anxiety and depression, they're not going to change anything. They're not going to, I know from my own experience, they're not going to be the ones who actually tackle the death of whole species of animals, of the climate catastrophe, of conflicts going on in Gaza and the Ukraine. It's the people who are out of that bubble who are actually helpful to do that. And I of course have a dream, I'm not sure if that's achievable, to sometimes kick people out of that bubble of anxiety.
Thank you, Stefan.
Excellent, very good.
Voilà, merci à Stefan Sagmeister d'avoir inauguré cette première saison de Zéro. Cet entretien m'a convaincu qu'il y avait une idée à creuser et que parfois un projet ne tenait qu'à un peu de courage et à un mail. J'espère que ce premier épisode vous a plu. Un grand merci à Axel Gobert, Elodie Bouty et Tristan Lochon pour leurs conseils. Merci à Jean Bar Musique pour les sons. Si vous avez aimé cet épisode, n'oubliez pas de vous abonner au flux, de liker, de partager pour soutenir ce projet. Et je vous dis à très bientôt.